Yo, what's going on guys? My name is Zeppelin and welcome back to the channel. I hope you are doing well. Now today I thought it would be interesting to make a review video of the Moral Panic 2 EP, which was released by Nothing But Thieves and is a sequel to the Moral Panic album that came out, I believe, just under a year ago. The reason for making this EP is that they believed that they had not finished talking about the concepts that they were talking about in their previous album and had made this just to kind of round out the journey that they felt that they went on with this album. The EP itself consists of 5 songs, all of which we have actually reacted to on this channel when they came out. There is Future Proof, which is the initial track and was one of the singles released for the upcoming release of this EP. Then we have the song If I Were You, followed by Miracle Baby, another single that was released for this album. Cine Rien, I think is how you say it, is the penultimate song on the album. That's probably not how you say it, by the way, don't quote me on that. And then finally we end with the song Your Blood. So this is definitely way shorter than the other album and definitely qualifies as an EP. However, I'm going to grade this EP in terms of it almost being like a short album because it does a couple of things really well in comparison to the previous piece of work it is based off, and I want to go in and discuss that in this review. So before we actually go in depth into the songs on this album, I believe it is worth mentioning how its predecessor Moral Panic rates in comparison to the rest of the Nothing But Thieves work and why I think this EP is an improvement over that. Just to put it out there, I believe that the third album, the Moral Panic album, is the worst album that they have released so far. However, that is still high praise considering how good the first 2 albums were, especially the second album being one of the best albums I have ever listened to. While it may be argued that on this album there's more of a clear structure and theme in mind in comparison to the first album, it is also just worth considering the quality of the songs on the first album in comparison to the third album. While the third album really sticks to trying to create a certain theme and running with that theme through and throughout the album, the first album that they did simply is just made up of good songs, with songs that they had written over their years as they were growing as a band and getting ready to write their own album. And some people would argue that having a concept piece in general is better than just an album full of different songs with no real pacing in mind. The first album still managed to keep a certain level of pacing with how the songs were placed on the album. And it is for that reason that I would put the first album above the third one, but just marginally. Nothing touches their second album. I believe that is up on a perch of its own, but I'm also going to now include the EPs that they have released from the first album onwards in the overall arc of how good I believe their albums are, or their discography, should I say. The reason I'm doing this and including EPs is because obviously this is in itself an EP, but there was another EP that they released in between the second and third album. I don't believe the EP actually had a name, but it had a number of songs on it, one of which is actually still probably my all-time favorite Nothing But Thieves songs, and I believe that that should be included in listing their discography because this isn't a band that simply throws reject songs into EPs. Their EPs are given just as much time and focus as the albums, and if anything, there's more of a clear structure within the EPs that they do rather than just the full albums where it sometimes feels like the concept is stretched out a little bit, and that's especially how the original Moral Panic album feels, with some songs feeling like they drag a little bit and are in there just to pad up the album and to try and keep with the theme, and sometimes it just for me doesn't really work on that album. So this is where we go into the Moral Panic 2 EP, and for me overall it feels like this EP just encompasses everything that the original album was trying to be and condenses it into a structure and a pacing that is way more enjoyable listening throughout. When listening to the first Moral Panic album, there are certain songs that you're just listening to as you go through that you either skip or feel a little bored of because some of it is just not necessarily their best work. Now that is entirely my opinion, but I think a lot of Nothing But Thieves fans would agree with me in saying that the Moral Panic album does feature some of their weaker work in comparison to their entire discography. And please, I know I've mentioned it before, but just remember when I'm talking about weaker songs, it is in comparison to their discography, which is very, very good as a whole. So I'm holding everything that they do here to a very, very high standard. So when I maybe call something poor, it doesn't mean it's necessarily poor in the terms of a base standard of music, but poor in comparison to the rest of their work. One thing that I did mention in my reactions, and I think is something that is also in this EP, is that the later Nothing But Thieves stuff has really started to do rock music that's more danceable too, has a very simpler beat, and it is of my opinion that the drummer has been really toned down in the last album or so because the beats have been made simpler for people to be able to enjoy easier. I believe the drumming on the Broken Machine album was absolutely brilliant, and it was the most disappointing thing for me overall to see how toned down the drummer was in the albums and EPs that preceded the second EP that came after, so Moral Panic and even Moral Panic 2 to an extent. However, while the drumming may still be toned down in this Moral Panic 2 EP, I do still believe that it actually works for the songs and that the songs are still good. It's just a pet peeve that I have. So before I give my final thoughts and opinions on the EP as a whole, I want to go through it quickly track by track and talk about the tracks and how they work in the overall tonality of the body of work. So as I said, first off we start with Future Proof. Now Future Proof is another kind of dance rock song, but it has heavy elements to it with really heavy distorted guitars, some distorted sounds in the background, and while it would not be my favourite piece of work, it's definitely an interesting way to open up the EP, and definitely feels like it's keeping in with the tone of the Moral Panic theme that they have set from the previous album. It also features some very good vocals as per usual with Nothing But Thieves, and I could see this being a very good hit song live for them, which I hope it will be, because as of the recording of this video I will be seeing them in just over 1 month. Next we move on to the song that I actually think is the weakest in the EP as a whole, but that again is just a compliment considering the high standard of this EP. The song is If I Were You. Now this song for me just feels like it has a bit of a basic beat. It feels like it was more of an afterthought of a song for the EP, but that's still, like, I would still give that close to an 8 out of 10 if not higher, just off the top of my head at the moment. And the fact that it goes really heavy at the end with its distortion sounds really sort of elevates the song for me and stops it from becoming boring, and it definitely feels like the right song to have put after Future Proof. The pacing in terms of this EP is immaculate, and I feel like this is where the pacing really begins to show itself off, especially as we go into the next song. The next song on this EP is Miracle Baby, and as I said before, this was one of the singles that they had released, and this is also a very sort of simple song in terms of how it is rock wise. It's not necessarily dance rock, however it's sort of simple, it's heavy, it messes with a couple of sounds more than the rest of the EP, and this is something that Nothing But Thieves I'd actually love to see them do more, is messing with sound distortion and different sounds. They seem to be getting more and more into it, but I absolutely love when they go into more experimental sound territory. They've done it with the remix that they'd done of one of the songs off their Moral Panic EP. I actually can't remember the name of it off the bat, but it came out very well, and it's something I'd like to see them do more of. And some of the sounds that are used in this particular song would work very good in a slowed down version, or even just working on different songs going forward to create a different type of sound, a more interesting sound. Not that what they're doing here isn't interesting, but people will get what I mean who have listened to it and know the sounds I'm talking about, know that there could be interesting things done with them. So after that we move into our penultimate song, Sine Ren. I'm just going to borderline give up on trying to pronounce that song, but this is actually a very heavy song, one of the heaviest songs they've ever done, surprisingly, and sounds like one that they're going to really struggle to replicate live with his voice. But this is a song that kind of throws care to the wind a little bit and just goes heavy and gives the Nothing But Thieves fans who are more of a fan of their heavier music just everything they want to hear, and definitely sort of fills a gap in this EP and the body of work as a whole that I feel like was missing in the original Moral Panic album, other than really Can You Afford to Be an Individual. Nothing But Thieves, even though they don't write loads of heavy rock songs, I do believe they really shine in that area, and the most they ever wrote in terms of heavy rock will be in the Broken Machine album, and I do consider that to be their best one. Not just because of the rock, there's a lot of things good with it, such as the pacing, but it's something that I definitely feel like they should do more of, because it really does sometimes fill out the sound of an album. Lastly, we move on to the song Your Blood, which for me actually snuck up to be one of my favourites in the entire EP, surprisingly. I've seen a lot of people draw comparisons with Radiohead for this song, and I honestly can't say that they're wrong in saying that. It's definitely a slow song that builds, that kind of has the exit music for a film vibes from Radiohead, and it's a very impassioned song that personally spoke a lot to me, and then builds into a very simple but enjoyable climactic rock part before fading back into simplicity. And I just feel like it was the perfect song to end the EP on, and it, in terms of the theme, it worked perfectly. In terms of the pacing, it worked perfectly. But then stripping all that back, just listening to the song on its own, it's a song that definitely brings out an emotional journey in the listener. So then, talking about this EP overall, there is not a single song in here I don't like, and I feel like its pacing is way better than the Moral Panic album. The songs as a whole are way better than the Moral Panic album, and honestly, if Nothing But Thieves turned into a band where they only released 6 to 8 songs an album as opposed to 12, really kind of refining their work and putting quality over quantity. Not that they don't necessarily do quality anyway, of course they do, but the fact that there's only 5 songs in this and it feels like they were really worked on and there was no real pressure on them to release this EP. They had just released an album. There was no need for them to do an EP afterwards. It felt like they sort of thrived in those conditions and made songs that are more thought-provoking than even what they intended them to be. Now, a tough job for me that I've actually been thinking about quite a lot is where I would rank this EP in comparison to the rest of their work, and it definitely for me goes in their top 3. I would not say it's above Broken Machine, even though Broken Machine I'm a little bit tired of now simply because I've listened to it so much. I can objectively say it's the best body of work they've ever produced. Now, my second favourite piece of work from them was actually their EP between their second and third album, and then in the third spot was their first album. However, now that the EP has come in, I believe it's taken third spot, and maybe there could be an argument made for it even taking the second spot, as the themes and the sounds that they're using in this are a little more interesting than the second EP, and it's definitely, how would you say, it's the quality of the music that they're writing. Even regardless of how good the music is, you can tell that the quality has improved in comparison to that EP in terms of their soundscape. So it's a very hard one to call. I'd honestly probably put those EPs right beside each other and say that they're good for different types of listening. I'd maybe say that if you want something that is from a little more the old style Nothing But Thieves, is to listen to the second EP, and if you want something that is sort of shows how they are now, then this Moral Panic 2 EP, their third EP, is the perfect one to go for. So this body of work overall keeps growing on me. I would definitely put it at an 8.5, maybe even a 9 out of 10. I highly recommend you listen to it along with their other EP. It's sort of a great way into the band to try and see whether or not you'd like the music, because it's a mix of slow stuff, catchy stuff, and some of the heaviest stuff they've ever done. It's sort of like just a sample and a taster of everything that they've done in their discography. So I highly recommend it if you have not listened to it, and if you have listened to it, I highly recommend you go right now and listen to it again, because you'll enjoy it. So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. I want to know whether you love the EP, hate the EP, think I'm being a bit too harsh on the previous album. Any thoughts at all, I'd love to see them down in the comments, and I hope to do more reviews like this, and maybe even go into review the other albums in more depth from their discography. So if you would like to see that, make sure to subscribe so that you can see that when that comes out, and make sure to let me know about that also down in the comments. So I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.